Thank you and good morning. I don't often say when I speak after a downtown leader like Michael that you're a tough act to follow. And you know I don't compliment unnecessarily, but you're a tough act to follow. And that's something I haven't necessarily perceived in every city, so good on you, as my Aussie clients would say, and you're lucky to have them. Thank you everyone for coming this early in the morning. I hope you all got good sleep last night. I did not. I was tossing and turning about how to spend the next 20 minutes. And probably more than I usually do, because I've been inundated with information after asking hundreds of questions over the last week or two virtually, and then in the last day or two physically here in your city. And I really struggled with what would be the most useful, valuable, impactful thing to share with you. I'm known for my bluntness, so clearly I was going to be blunt, but how deep to go into various issues, how much to cover, and I always have the challenge of having more to say than, frankly, I have time for. Oh. I don't have the image on my screens down here, and I'm supposed to. I wonder if that can be done. Right now it just says Brent Toderian. So I have to turn my back and look over here. I want to start with an example of candor, because I said I was going to do this. When I tweeted that I was coming to Sacramento, I got a lot of replies through Twitter. And one of the replies said, "Will be interesting to hear what advice you give and how much of it is followed." And another person who is here today said, "Call me cynical, but Sacramento and SacHog are famous for bringing in innovative and inspirational speakers and then continuing to do exactly what they have always done." Now, whether or not that is excessively cynical or just telling the truth, I can tell you that that is true of most cities that I come to, because it is entirely too easy to have just a good conversation and then do business as usual. So I actually responded and said that, here's an idea: when I do my public presentation, I'm going to start with that slide. So I promised I would do it, and I did it. Because that's the level of candor I want to have in all of my conversations with your city. Tell me the truth about why good ideas or better ideas aren't actually happening. And by the way, the internet also told me if I threw up an image of Light the Beam, I would get you on my side. But that is crass and manipulative, so I would never do that. Hashtag Light the Beam. So I am known for what I call strategic impatience. City planners are known to be long-term thinkers, to have patience. I don't buy that. There's a lot of things that we're dealing with in our cities where we should choose to be impatient, and quite strategically so. And even more dramatically, this is the appropriate word to be using when we're talking about a lot of the challenges we face and a lot of the challenges our cities and downtowns face. And even before the pandemic, I was talking about the 5 crises, the 5 overlapping and corresponding crises that our cities are facing: the climate crisis, the housing and homelessness and affordability crisis, the racism and classism and inequity and inaccessibility crises that our cities are facing that played out during the pandemic in the context of the George Floyd murder, the public health crisis that we were already facing in terms of epidemics of preventable diseases that were directly connected to how we're planning and designing our cities, and particularly our suburbs. And that was even before a virus changed our world. And the infrastructure cost crisis, which is more prevalent in the United States than any other part of the world, where we are literally bankrupting our cities financially because of how we're building out and not necessarily up. And these are crises that are facing every city. So on top of that, of course, and overlapping with that, in the downtowns particularly, you are not unique in your homelessness crisis, your awful and violence-inducing drug crisis, which is the new thing that has happened in the last decade or so, your mental illness crisis, all of which are overlapping and playing out in your downtowns. Every downtown is facing this issue. And I have to say, based on the commentary I heard before I came, I expected to see more evidence of that really significantly overriding your downtown. But actually, you're not as bad as some of the other places. You're not as bad as downtown Vancouver in terms of the actual impact that is landing on the ground in your streets and in your parks. And I say that with absolute focus on the fact that, you know, the homeless is not a problem to solve. It's a human crisis that needs to be addressed in appropriate and proper ways and human ways. So on top of all that, we get a global pandemic, and the progress that downtowns were making all over North America take a big hit, a popping of the balloon, a letting out of the wind out of your sails, and suddenly we're having this conversation about how to use public space in the context of a deadly pandemic, where we all had to get outside more because indoors was considered unsafe. And cities got creative, necessarily so, at least temporarily so. And I have to say, one of the great failures of North American cities is we are bad at learning from crises. The rest of the world changed their cities permanently during the pandemic. We changed our cities too much temporarily during the pandemic. You, like many other cities, said, well, the pandemic is over. By the way, it's not. And we can go back to normal. And that was a big mistake that many North American cities have made, because you failed to recognize that the changes we made during the pandemic were better for quality of life and urban success and sustainability and multi-mobility, et cetera, whether or not the pandemic was over or not. And so there was this opportunity. I don't like to use the word opportunity in the context of literal life and death crises. My father died of COVID, so I don't like the crassness of that. I tend to use the word responsibility more than opportunity. But cities seized the responsibility to do their cities better based on what they were observing during the pandemic. And I work all over the world. One of the examples that most inspired me is I work in a number of Irish cities, and Dublin is the Irish city that is known as the place where good ideas go to die. And they said things that seemed unimaginable and unattainable until recently are suddenly happening in Dublin city streets. I see now that these are not on and this is on, so I can look at that to see, so I don't need to turn my back to you. Thank you for that. So, all that is happening, and suddenly there's a conversation about our downtown's done. Our downtown's dead. And there's a lot of folks, including my friend Richard Florida and such, that sort of proclaimed that this was the last nail in the coffin of downtowns relative to, I'm overstating a bit, he'll be mad at me if he hears me say that, but it was a little bit too much of this narrative that said, you know, downtowns were struggling to begin with. They certainly won't be the same as they were in the past, which is true, but they might actually be significantly damaged. And here's the truth. All sectors, elements, aspirations of downtown health were impacted, at least temporarily, probably in some cases, possibly in some cases permanently. And the question is how permanent those effects will be, and that's still unclear yet. Anybody who tells you they know the answer to that at this point is trying to get a soundbite for the media. We don't know fully yet, and I ask that question and investigate those questions more than most. The question for me is, how much damage did downtowns take due to the pandemic? Was it just we had been making progress and we lost 5 years of momentum and now we have to make up that ground again? Or was there something fundamental, a leg of the stool knocked out that won't come back? And thus we have to rethink our definition of success and purpose and vision in the downtown. That's the key question that cities and downtowns around the world are focusing. And by the way, add to that on top of everything else, if you haven't had a truck occupation in your downtown yet, you're lucky. Don't assume that it won't come your way. I'm telling cities to prepare their regulations to make sure it's not possible before it happens, because, you know, protest is allowed, free speech is welcome and encouraged, but free speech doesn't include your truck. You don't get to bring your truck and park it for a month in the downtown, in downtown neighborhoods. North American downtowns, in my opinion, no, not in my opinion, I know this, are too big to fail. The narrative that there will be a new model for cities and city regions, it's a dispersed model, that we can't count on the downtown anymore. It's an easy statement to make, but if you actually understand the economics of cities and city regions, we can't afford for that to be true, because there's no other pattern that actually provides the economic engine that downtowns provide. So I am out there saying, don't let that be true. Fight to make sure that isn't true, because they are too important. That's what I mean by big. Too important to allow to fail. We can't afford, nobody can afford for our downtowns to start a death spiral. And I've worked in a lot of downtowns that were in the midst of the death spiral, and part of my job was to help stop the bleeding. You don't want to be there. You're not there, and you don't want to be there. More than ever, we need to make the complete, compelling business case for strategic downtown action and investment. You've heard that message a number of times today. Michael, you even repeated the line a couple of times. You need to really have that be a critical message. The business case for downtown is obvious. You cannot survive economically. Forget culture and social and entertainment and all the other reasons, community identity that downtown plays. Just financially, you literally can't work. The city regions don't work without a strong, prosperous downtown. And so what I like to say, because I beat this drum a lot, is everyone benefits from a healthy downtown, no matter where you live and work and whether you ever go downtown or whether you ever even think about downtown. You're benefiting from the strength of a strong downtown. And Michael, you had a better line that I'm going to steal, and I will attribute it to you in the future. But that message is so key and so relevant. And we've got the math, the analysis to prove, if you needed proof, more proof, that the downtown plays that role. It's the economic engine. All urban parts of a city and city region play that role. And your finances, your economics, your ability to pay for things like homelessness programs, et cetera, don't succeed if you don't have that economic engine properly functioning. Critically important, and we don't talk about it enough. So I'm glad to hear it discussed so much this morning. So we're faced with these challenges. What will working from home do in our downtown, particularly in a downtown that's been so dependent on state-level employment? We don't know yet. No one does. I heard in the conversations over the last week or two that, well, New York has studied it and seen that there's going to be a 25% work from home level once things stabilizes. I'm here to tell you whether or not that's true for New York or not, it's not true for Sacramento. There will be a different answer in Sacramento. It's probably not even true for New York. It's a guess, an educated guess, and everything I know about projections like this is they're wrong. I just don't know by how much and what direction. But what I say is what we need is scenarios thinking. We don't know what the downtown situation is going to be for an element or a factor like work from home. What we need are robust strategies that work if the work from home is 10%, 15%, 25%, 50%. And so what I talk about are the actions that work no matter and are beneficial no matter what the truth is in terms of those kinds of scenarios. So we know more dense housing. Housing is the closest thing to a silver bullet in a downtown where there's no such thing as silver bullets. It's the most obvious no-brainer in a place where there are no no-brainers because downtowns are just too complex. But we know that housing is the closest thing to that. And I'm talking about all housing, not just affordable housing, not just rental housing, ownership housing too. All kinds of housing help in the continuum of body heat that strengthens your downtown and the affordability continuum that isn't just about below market housing. You need to be providing housing of all types in a robust and diverse downtown because they do different things in the economic ecosystem that a downtown is. Livable amenities to support that housing. You can't just be building units without building neighborhoods, and amenities are what make downtown living livable. And if you're not producing the amenity, you're not getting the livability. That's something that Vancouver has always been particularly good at, the livability supports that make the downtown housing outperform the suburbs in terms of its attractiveness and its magnetism to attract people, including, by the way, families. And you need the specific conversation about whether you want to attract families into your downtown or not. Right now, you're repelling them by default, because we're designing downtown housing in a way that virtually repels families. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that families will never come downtown. It's not true, but it's true in the way that most downtowns are doing it. And frankly, most American downtowns are doing it, not doing a good job. Safety for all, both reality and perception, including safety for the most vulnerable, such as the homeless and the addicted, but also safety for everyone in the context of conventions and tourism and economic development. Housing and supports, obviously, for the unhoused, the mentally ill, the addicted. We need much more at the state level supports for that. That is an obvious no-brainer. Transforming street life, temporary and permanently, and I've talked about the need to take some of those things you did temporarily and make them permanent. Public realm and placemaking improvements. I'm glad that was such a big part of Michael's message, but you can do a lot better in terms of what I've actually seen out there on the ground. lean into your assets, your water edge, your heritage, your government, everything that is a benefit, lean into it and take better advantage of it. Reform your parking and your parking requirements, multimodal infrastructure, and do that fast. You're doing your bike infrastructure barely at all and much too slow. And you should be doing what smart cities are doing, which is piloting a complete bike network that connects downtown and midtown, et cetera, in a way that will actually work and attract riders, because if you don't have a network, it doesn't work. So there are plenty of things you can be inspired from other cities, how to transform and reactivate parking, on-street parking for placemaking, how to use your parking lots and your vacant development sites for transformation of space. Latin American cities that I work in do this better than any other parts. We have simple placemaking building blocks like food carts and food trucks and container urbanism, whatever you're thinking about in terms of activating quiet and dead spaces that are usually government and cultural, civic related, add things in that add life, and it's not hard. So with that, and I don't have a lot of time left, but I thought about how much I get right into the commentary about Sacramento. So what about Sacramento specifically? And bear in mind, I'm still new to the conversation, but I am someone who prides myself on being able to make observations and judgments pretty quickly. Here's my very technical starting statement, because everybody's asked me what's my first impression of downtown Sacramento. Not bad under the circumstances, all things considered. Better than I expected. Surprising strengths that I didn't expect to see. But things will likely get worse here unless the right actions are taken to help them get better. Because my observation of the cycle of success or failure of downtowns is if you aren't getting better, you're getting worse. So you are at a specific moment where you can take deliberate and intentional action to address some of your, not necessarily weakness, but your underperforming elements or aspects. You've got things to build on. You've got a character and sense of place in your architecture and your infrastructure that I haven't seen in that many cities. You've got light rail, although you need more. You're working on finally defining maybe a perfectly successful character for key streets like K Street. You've got sport investment in your downtown, which is rare and amazing, and it's amazing to me that you did that within the last 10 years and managed to do Light the Beam in the last 4 months. That shows a willingness to do the right move and to do it fast, which I'm impressed by. Yes, I took a picture of your new sign. It's a very good sign. But you've got a real gem in Old Sacramento. I don't need to tell you that, but there are ways that you could improve it and fix it, and one of the ways is your connection, although present, is less than ideal. And so we were talking about a lighting installation underneath to make it not only brighter, but more visually interesting, because you're depending on that access to do a lot of work for you in terms of getting people down there. I have to say this, I laughed at the sign downstairs that said, "Old Sacramento, come find it." And I know you probably, I don't know if you meant that to be ironic or really honest, but it really makes the honest statement that it's kind of hard to find. And I like bluntness, so I really appreciated that. But I'm not sure if you meant it that way. But it is kind of hard to find, or to get to, in a way that's going to be comfortable for everyone. You've got patio space on your sidewalk, but it's timid. It's not nearly as ambitious as it could be. And yet, on the private sector side, I saw building after building where families and businesses, local businesses, had put remarkable investment into creating something really special. And yes, you've got housing. And you've got mid-rise housing around your downtown, but I have to say every single example of housing I saw within the downtown, my first response was, is that it? You didn't do more. And one of my main investigations through the last while has been, why didn't you do more? And digging deep into the economics of that. So I'm going to end with a few slides where you don't have to read all the words. You can look at it later. But I decided for the folks who wanted detail from me, I would give you some detail. So the strengths that other downtowns don't have, I don't do the regular strength analysis because a lot of downtowns have the same strengths. But these are things I saw in your city that I don't see normally. Obviously, that huge sport and cultural and tourism and civic investment that other cities would kill for any one or two of these things, you've got a lot of them in your downtown. New housing under construction, that's a good thing, but you could do a lot more and be more ambitious. Authentic local businesses and investors. It blew my mind how successful your downtown, and yet it hasn't been overrun by chains. It's a remarkable strength that you have, the authenticity of the business community that you have here. And frankly, I should have heard about that already, so that you could amp that up in your branding and your marketing. Old Sacramento is a huge opportunity, less blight than I expected. We talked about blight, but I looked for it, and I saw less than I expected. Opportunities for growth and change in terms of expanding the land base of the central city, good and improving partnerships, which are the key to making things actually happen. I've been having many conversations with your leaders about how people work together. Strong local champions, organizations, including my host today, and a culture of pride and passion that I don't see everywhere. There was a lot of pride in almost everyone I talked to, and not that much whining, where it's about, well, it's, do you know what's really wrong here, and it's somebody else's fault. I didn't get a lot of that. I saw a lot of talk about opportunity, but there was a conversation about, well, then why isn't it happening? Similarly, the challenges are, the good news is they are challenges every downtown face. They're not unique to you, so you can learn from other cities. Not enough housing being built fast enough, addiction, mental health, and homelessness. You don't need a made-in-Sacramento approach to that. Garbage and blight as a corollary, loss of downtown jobs to work from home, signs of failure to act effectively. I heard a lot about why the hell aren't the lights on K Street getting fixed? And I've had conversations with your leaders. I put that kind of thing in the category, and forgive my language because I'm Canadian and I don't always swear, but I put that into the category of get your shit together kind of stuff, where why can't you get a light fixed or replaced? And so having an energy around getting that stuff done fast, really important. You've got a kind of not just a cars first attitude in your downtown, but and I get that there is some bike infrastructure and you do have LRT, but it still feels to me like it's cars first, second, and third. And you need to be more multimodal because that's what success looks like from now on. Weak public realm activation relative to what you could be doing, despite advantages and opportunities you have for placemaking that other cities don't have. Scott and I were walking around for 2 days now, and I kept saying, that's big. Why haven't you taken advantage of it in terms of placemaking? And I hear commentary, notwithstanding the passion I said, exists, that there is complacency and apathy. Complacency in the sense that, well, our downtown is doing well enough and doesn't need more dramatic intervention, or apathy in the sense of what is happening in downtown doesn't matter to me, doesn't matter to my life. So, some quick urgent intentional actions. Prioritize your housing faster. Rethink your height restrictions relative to doing more housing in your downtown. And I could talk for a while on that, but I won't. Challenge the state to fix, and for our state representatives in the audience here, challenge you to fix this problem of owned apartment insurance and liability, because it's the reason you're not achieving ownership housing as part of the continuum of housing in your downtown. Don't tell me it can't be fixed, because every place other than the United States doesn't have that problem, so that tells me you can fix it. Improve your conditions for everyone relating to homelessness, both the unhoused and the people who are neighbors to the unhoused. And reject the false choice between those two things. You don't have to choose between addressing homelessness in a humane way and fighting for economic development. That is a false choice. Good strategies do both all the time. Fix your broken stuff immediately, like lighting. Build multimodal infrastructure fast through network pilots. Activate your streets with seating again, like you did during the pandemic. Rethink your one-way streets. You've got too many god-awful one-way streets that are traffic sewers to get through the downtown. Improve your placemaking and your connections, like to Old Sacramento, and market your downtown better. That's not a disrespect to the marketers here. They are remarkably sophisticated in your city, but I say all of you should be marketing your downtown better, because what I find is the grassroots marketing that establishes an identity for the city, other than being a place for state office buildings. That's what creates an authentic identity. You can't create it in the offices of an economic development or a tourism development organization. So market toot your horn more. I asked on Twitter, is it true that Sacramento folks don't toot their horn enough? And I got a, yeah, it's true. We don't brag because we think it might be off-putting. So I say to you, you've got stuff to brag about it. My last message, the good ideas that are the easy part. I'm going to be talking with your organization as I continue my relationship with you for a while, and we're going to talk a lot about ideas, but I'm going to be obsessive compulsive about the real challenge, which is being honest about why those good ideas haven't been happening. Because I'm probably not going to bring you new ideas, but we're going to have a real candid talk about why the good ideas haven't been happening and change that, whatever it takes. So are you ready for that? That's my message to you. And thank you. I'm overtired, but I hope that we're talking about these kinds of things in as candid and blunt a way as possible. So good morning and thank you.